How's everybody doing? My name is Stan Long. They call me Stack. I'm from the DMV, born in Virginia, and I'm here to tell my story a little bit to you guys. Let you get a little bit acquainted about my life and tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from and where I'm trying to go. I'm an author, first-time author. I wrote a book, Blackbird Medley, The Transformation of a Gangster. I want to tell you a little bit about that, but first I'll talk about a little bit why I even wrote the book. A lot of people want to know, why would you write a book, autobiography, and why would people be interested in your autobiography? And I would say I wrote this book because I had a story. Most people do, they just don't tell it. But I was willing to tell a story about a young man coming up in a struggle. Of course, in the DMV, a lot of people struggle, but everybody's struggle is not the same. So I was a young man coming up in a situation where we were in poverty, and we lived in a bunch of projects, Q Street Northwest, shout out to Uptown, and Eastern Avenue Northeast. Moved to Maryland, back and forth. Moved to a bunch of cities, actually, you guys, but mainly I lived in the DMV area. And so that's why I repped the DMV. When I was 1, we moved to Q Street Northwest. We lived on Fairmont Street, and for you guys not familiar with the DMV, that's the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, getting popular now with the DMV. We united. Thanks for that. So at the end of the day, man, I wanted to just get into the fact that you can be a person who struggle, and you can take that struggle and make a positive out of it. And so I wanted to tell the negative first. You know, a lot of people didn't think that was appropriate to tell the negative first, but I decided to tell the negative first and then bring out the positive. Now I'm a motivational speaker. I have another book coming out called Damaged Goods, Is It Me? And we're going to shoot the documentary for that shortly, and we're going to interview a bunch of women and tell their story about how they've been molested and how does it change the demographics of their relationships and that sort of thing. But my story personally was a story of triumph, really, because I come from actually nothing, dirt roads of Virginia, farm town, and never thought that I would be able to make it in a big city as a child because my family was from the South. But we all migrated to the North, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. So I have family all over, and we decided that we was going to give it a swing and make the best of it. So as a young child, I was kind of sort of the average kid. You know, I was a little rambunctious, but for the most part, I was the average kid, had average friends, and we grew up in the projects. You know, the first projects I can remember, we didn't even have a lock on the door. They didn't have a lock, so we would have to prop a chair. And that's the type of poverty that we grew up in. We were living in a Baltimore area because we couldn't afford to live in Washington, D.C. at the time. My father, he left when I was 1, so it was just me and moms couldn't afford the luxuries of having these fine apartments and homes and cars, so we caught buses and we did what we had to do. But along the way, I decided that I wanted better, so I got caught up in the drug trade, and I decided that I was going to get it from that. And you know how that goes. It's the average, young man's story today. But it turned into some other things, and God kept his hands on me. Thank God for that. So I guess now I'm at a point where I decided to transform myself into a better young man. And so I still have shortcomings, but for the most part, I'm just trying to be a better person. So now we're going to do some positive things, and I'm mentoring with some other young cats, and I talk to the young cats about how to get out the street and how to make a better life for themselves. So that's what I want to speak about in this book. This book right here is just that story. This book tells a whole bunch about a whole bunch of different aspects of life. Being molested by young women, or older women actually, when I was a young boy. It made me a sort of a promiscuous young man, so I started, having sex early and doing a lot of things that a lot of young men get themselves caught up in, having sex with the babysitters and all this other kind of stuff. So, by the time I was, in the 12th grade, I was driving Porsches and BMWs and all this other kind of stuff. So when I graduated from high school, my life took off and never really turned around. It just turned straight into kind of a gangster sort of lifestyle, so to speak. So at that point, it was no turning back. I got a taste of that money. And when I got a taste of that money, you know how that is. You get a taste of that money, it's no turning back. And at that point, I just decided, to go for it. My family was all over the place, and I just decided I was going to take off and make a life for myself. So, we're going to take a few questions, and I'll answer a few questions about the book, and I'll let you guys take a look into my life, because I'm proud to say that it's taking a turn for the best, and that's a good thing. I thank God for that, because if not for balance, then I had to thank, it's a young lady, Robin, actually. She's the co-host of my talk show now. I have a TV talk show, and she gave me my first Bible. I didn't even know what a Bible consisted of. I had been, raised in the church as a kid, but I never read the Bible until I got older. And when she gave me that Bible, it kind of made a big difference in my life. So I thank God for her. She came in my store one day in Maryland. I used to have a beauty and barber supply store, which actually, that's the scene. If you watch the trailer, you'll see a scene where I was taken from that shop in an attempted kidnapping. That was the store that the Bible was received at. I was given a Bible by Tanya Blunt, and shout out to Tanya. She was signed to Bad Boy at the time, Bad Boy Records. And she came down with Robin, her road manager at the time, and they gave me a Bible. And it's kind of ironic. I really wasn't interested in reading the Word of God or anything like that, but you know how that goes. Sometimes you don't be willing, but He just kind of make a way for you anyway. So I started reading it, and things started being a little different. I still was kind of thugging it out, but it started being a little different for me. So we're gonna take some questions, because I could talk about me all day, but I want to talk about some of the things that affect me that could affect you, that make a difference in your life. So, my man Rock, shout out to Rock too. Sky's the limit. He's always on the scene with the production. So once again, it's another Sky's the limit affair. Salute, and we're gonna get it cracking and talk about some things that's in the book. So, what you got for me, homie?
All right. Let's talk about, I guess, the ills, the social ills in the ghetto that caused you to get into the drug game. What caused you to fall into that? What caused you to fall into that drug gang?
Poverty, actually. It's the same thing pretty much most young cats get caught up in. You get to see, like, we were living in Baltimore at the time when I first got an inkling that I thought I wanted to be in the drug game. I found a bag of heroin, and I found $10,000. I was 9 years old. And that's one of the ways that we got out of the projects early. We threw the dope away. We thought it was, at 9 years old, you don't know what heroin is, so, well, I didn't. But I knew what $10,000 looked like. You did. So we took $10,000 to Mom's, and when she saw that it was a lot of money, that was a way for us to escape. But we still had poverty chasing us for some reason. It was hard, to escape that poverty level. So I decided, I watched a lot of pimps and a lot of that kind of stuff in Baltimore in our neighborhood. There was a whole bunch of pimping and a whole bunch of dope selling, older cats in the neighborhood. So I always wanted to find the things that I saw them with. I saw them with cattle. I never thought as a kid that blacks could own Mercedes. I thought Mercedes was for white men and Cadillacs was for black men that had wealth. That's the way we saw it, because we never saw white people, first of all, in our neighborhood. And then second of all, we never saw a Mercedes-Benz, nowhere near our neighborhood, because white men were always driving Mercedes, and they didn't come in North Avenue and Winchester Arms and Poplar Grove and Park Heights Terrace. They wasn't around. Those are treacherous neighborhoods that I grew up in. So these men, they didn't frequent those type of neighborhoods, but the blacks that had wealth from selling dope and pimping and whatever else they was involved in, running numbers, those were the men that came around with the big white walls with the drop-top caddies. So I wanted that. And I wanted to know how they did get it. And so I dug deep, and I started talking to young men who was getting money. I started hanging around young men that was getting money, and they turned me on to how to get some money at a very young age. And I just really, I didn't really care too much about consequences at the time, because we were already poor. And I think that's what happens in the ghettos today. If you already, sleeping 9 to a room and 4 to a room, and mama on crack or mama don't have a job, and you really don't think about the ills of selling drugs and what the consequences are. This is what white people perpetuate on you and say you should be ashamed and you're hurting your community. But you already see the pain in your community when you're a young kid growing in the ghetto. Your community is already in pain because they're already impoverished. So you don't feel you contributing. You feel you're an asset to the community because you can buy things for your friends, and you can kind of change the game for the neighborhood, and that's what I wanted to do. And so that was one of the reasons that dope selling was appealing, because what else was it to do to get you out of the projects? I'm 5'6", where you gonna shoot a jumper, go to the league? You know, at that point, that wasn't a question. So you just had to think, what you gonna do? How you gonna get out the ghetto? You can't stay in the ghetto your whole life unless you just don't want for something. I always wanted for something. So I decided I'm gonna take me something. So you was gonna rob, kidnap, or pimp, or sell dope. So selling dope was the easier aspect of the rest of those equations. I decided to sell some dope, and so I was good at it. I became very good at it, and I became, you know, a person who was well connected at one point, to where it was, you know, you're only as big as your connect, or as strong as your connect. You gotta remember that. So, you know, if you got a strong connect, then hustling is easy. All you got to do is have the heart for hustle, you know. And if you have the heart for hustle, then you pretty much gonna make a lot of money, because you're gonna get amongst people who have that same heart. So it was, you know, it was a situation where, you know, at one time I felt bad about what we were doing, but you also get addicted to selling drugs. You know, a lot of people don't address this, but selling drugs is an addiction for both ends. If you start selling drugs at a high level, then you get addicted to the money, as well as the high that you get from getting away, so to speak, or beating the system, so to speak. It becomes an addiction for you. So that was some of the things that I faced, you know, growing up in the hood. I got addicted to selling dope because the money was crazy. I mean, you would make money that people couldn't imagine you could make on the levels and the scales that we make money. What's going on, y'all? So at the end of the day, man, from coming from the Baltimore side, the way we got to Baltimore was my father lived in Baltimore. So my mother was actually living with him in Uptown. We was living on Q Street. And then we moved to Fairmont. So we end up, when I was 1, we end up moving. I think I was maybe 2, 3 years old. We moved down to Baltimore. And Baltimore, don't sleep, man. Shout out to Baltimore, too. Be more careful, man. They treacherous down there. So I learned how to defend myself there. Got in a whole bunch of fights there. Park Heights Terrace. Shout out to Park Heights Terrace, man. Shout out to Winchester Arms. Shout out to North Avenue. The whole Baltimore fam, man. The West Side up, man. East Siders. We was riding on both sides. So I got a whole bunch of family from my father's side down there. And so Mom was still working on the Maryland side. She was working over at Andrews Air Force Base. She was a recruiter. And so eventually they separated for good, and that's how we end up moving from the Baltimore side, and I permanently was placed over to the DC side. But when I got over to that DC side, man, I already had some hustle in me. So, you know, with the hustle and the muscle involved, you get involved with the right people, and here we go. So I met a young man, Black, man. Shout out to Edgewood, my little home dude from up Edgewood. I met Slim. And when I met this dude, man, this dude changed the game because he was connected. So I saw him, he had the Audi, remember the Audi 5000? Slim had the Audi 5000, a pocket full of money. So, and he was dressing real fly every day, so of course I wanted some of that. So when he connected with me, man, he taught me the game, took me up Edgewood, showed me how to get it in. So we was getting it in up there, man, and once we got it in up there, I got a taste of that city. And I saw how DMV was moving. Man, DC was moving a whole lot different than Baltimore. And we talking a 30-minute span. You know, we talking straight up the Parkway. And when you get up that Parkway, you got to get right, because DMV, man, DC, man, at the time, it wasn't DMV, it was DC. DC was representing a whole nother light. So when I got up there, man, I was already prepared, because Baltimore was sucker free too. So when I got to DMV, it was just a matter of transitioning. And I did that well. I got some friends, and I got connected. And it was on. I mean, when I say it was on, it was way on. So that's what basically happened from the the Baltimore transition over to the district transition. It was a different whole style. I got introduced to the go-go, changed everything. I mean, that totally changed everything. The go-go, when I went to the go-go, we would meet people who was pretty much just like us, grinders, trying to get their hustle on. And that was like the hustle set for everybody in DC. You know, you get to the go-go, it was just like a hustlers meeting. You know, we used to even have what they call, and I would like to bring that back too, man, called the Hustlers Balls. You know, we used to have Hustlers Balls in DC, man. We got up to number 9 as far as I can remember. and then it fell off from there. But we used to have hustlers balls 1, 2, 3, and it would be at hotels, and everybody would G up and come out with the big cars and the minks and all that, man, and G up real good and bring the girls out and pop bottles, and it was serious. You know, it was like you ever seen pimps up, hoes down? Well, it was like that for us in the DMV with the go-go thing, and so now the young guys took it over, but it was a totally different era for us, man. That was an outlet. So we would go there and talk numbers, sit at the bar and talk about, you know, who got what and what's going on in the city and who need to do what. And I mean, that was just like a meeting place. It just wasn't a place for music. You know, it was a whole nother movement. And so that was something that I love. I fell in love with the go-go, and that changed a lot too, as far as how I felt about the two different cities. You know, no disrespect. God kept his hand on me, like I tell everybody, and you know, if you from DMV, you know you gonna need some of that. You need God to put his hands on you, cause it's rough. It's a rough city. It's Beirut at the end of the day. You know, like if you look at the trailer, you'll see that we was averaging 400 plus homicides back in the 89s and 90s, when people was having 70 and 80 and 100 and 200. This small little condensed city was averaging 400 and 500 homicides a year with no gang activity. So that's something in itself to speak on. They'll say, you know, that's a hell of a story. So that's all in this book, man. All of these stories is in here, but it's not a dope book. These stories in here about a whole bunch of other stuff that's not having anything to do with drugs at all, selling dope. It has things to do with serious issues in life. So, you know, that's why I would recommend Blackbird Melody, The Transformation of a Gangster, to any young man or woman who wants to have a hell of a story read to them and really be able to change some things. There's some rules and regulations to play by in this book. There's some things that people haven't really considered that they may have went through that they haven't even thought about in this book. So I would really encourage everybody to get out there and get that book, man, and read it and tell me what you think. Go on there, you can blog to me, let me know what you think. I got a blog site on blackbirdmelody.com. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say.